Welcome to another episode of Scale Up or Sell, the podcast where we talk about what's important when scaling a business or prepping one for sale. Today's guest is Arch Downie, a leadership coach focused on helping business owners and leaders in the SME space deliver on their dreams. Now, I've known Arch a long time now, and I know he's lived the journey that he helps others through. So, Arch, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark.
I understand you've got a story to share with us.
I do. I think it's a story that will probably just lead us nicely into the conversation that we wanted to have today. So it's a story about a young man. There's nothing particularly special about this young man, and there's nothing particularly unusual about him either. He was the eldest of three boys. He grew up on a dairy farm, and he went to a private all-boys school. And his parents divorced when he was 11. And this young guy was a reasonably gifted sportsman. And he played at school, he played a number of different sports, one of which was AFL football, just like his father had. And his father loved football. And this young man enjoyed it, but he didn't love it the way his father did. And while he was on the football field playing, and he played all through his high school years, so there were a number of times where his father would be on the sideline yelling to the son. And while those comments from the dad weren't derogatory, to this young man, they didn't feel like they were all that supportive either. And playing all those games and listening to those comments over all those years, this young man formed a belief. And that belief was that if he was the best player on the ground, then that was good enough. That was acceptable or, perhaps even expected. But if he wasn't the best player on the ground, then that wasn't good enough. And he carried that view through life. He played a lot of sport. But he always had the feeling that other players and other teams were better than he and his team. And he did a lot of other things in life outside of sport, but he still carried this feeling that he wasn't quite good enough. And as he got a bit older after he left school, this young man joined a big corporate company. And over a period of years, he worked his way through, and he climbed up the corporate ladder, and eventually he became a senior manager in that organisation. And he deserved to be there. He'd worked hard, he'd taken moves, he'd done all the things that had been required for him to do. So he deserved to be in that role. And in that role, he had the title, and he had the influence, and he had the income. So he had everything that he needed to influence change in that organisation. Unfortunately for him, that belief that he'd formed on the football field years before was still with him. So despite having everything that he needed, he still felt that he was unable to affect change in the organisation. He felt powerless. So it's perhaps not surprising that one day this young man was retrenched from that organisation, and that sent him into a bit of a spiral. Having lost his job, he didn't really know who he was or who he wanted to be. He was also in a relationship that wasn't all that supportive. In fact, that relationship was undermining and damaging for him. That relationship was reinforcing all those beliefs that he'd already formed on the football field years before. And it wasn't long after his retrenchment that relationship ended. And for this young man, that was actually a good thing. So, Mark, that probably sounds like a bit of a sad old story for us to start our conversation today. But unfortunately, it's a story I know really well, because the young man in that story was me. So I was, I think, in my sort of early mid-40s at this stage, and sort of no job, no relationship, no home. And the obvious question was, well, what do I do now? And I just had this underlying feeling that I wanted to be a better human being. I didn't really know what that looked like or how to get there, wherever there might have been at that stage. So I'll probably just leave it there, but hopefully that gives our listeners a little bit of an insight into me.
Thank you, Arch. It's such a powerful story, and more so because it's your story, right? And that you have lived through that adversity, you have lived through those difficulties, and you've been through the journey of the repair and subsequent growth, right? Which is so important. And everybody has their story, but sometimes you don't, as you've discovered, sometimes you don't discover. What you've learned as a child, you don't discover that's a problem until something goes wrong, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah. No, often a theme. So you've been in coaching for quite a while now. How long have you been in coaching?
Yes, just coming up to 5 years. Be 5 years
So
in April this year.
that's right. And I know in 5 years you've helped a lot of people. You've done some given tremendous amount of value to them and
Yep.
helped them on their way. Can you give some examples of clients and the sorts of things they came to you with, the sort of baggage they came to you
Yeah,
with,
sure,
the
sure.
drama?
Yeah. So I've probably got three that I could share with you. And the first one of those would be the frustrated business owner. So this guy was a financial planning business who weren't hitting targets. The financial planner, the business owner, was doing their share, but they had a team of people working with them who weren't really contributing their share to what the budgeted income was. So the business owner is frustrated because at times he felt like he was carrying the team, but he also had a health condition sitting in the background. And he just needed to make sure that that health condition didn't get the better of him. And one of the triggers for that health condition was stress. So getting overstressed wasn't going to be good for his health, and he knew that. So it was all about, how do I grow the business without getting myself too stressed? He was also procrastinating on a few things that he knew would really move the business forward, but for some reason he just couldn't get himself to do that, and that was adding to his frustration. Um, and he also had, like a lot of business owners, he had a lot of ideas about things that he could do to move the business forward, but he had cash flow that was holding him back from executing those ideas. So I spent a fair bit of time working with this guy and his team. We worked on goal setting and clarity. We worked on decision making and overcoming those negative habits. So as we worked through, they found there were a lot of things in there that they could do a lot better than they were doing. So they've made a lot of changes to their system and their process just by examining what they were doing.
Arch,
We looked at,
Arch, where,
yep.
where was the stress coming from? Was it some personal experience from before?
Yeah, it was, the stress was that they weren't hitting the target. So they
Right.
had a financial target that they'd set that they wanted to achieve. Well, they actually had two. So they'd set a financial target. This is what we really want. And then they had another target here, but we're willing to accept this.
Mm,
So one of the first things we did was remove that. Let's
mm,
not settle. Let's go for what we really want here. So we got them focused on the thing that they really want, which then builds
mm,
their excitement and their emotional connection. So
yeah.
their stress was coming from not hitting that target, which meant that the business owner was the one who wasn't getting paid.
It's around perform. It's sort of almost a performance anxiety, isn't it? It's like, oh, why
Yeah,
am I not performing? I should be performing, and then this self
mm,
doubt that comes in, and
yeah,
and some of those things, and maybe he learned some of those traits on the footy field too.
yeah, possibly. But his frustration was that he was the one doing the work. He was the one carrying the team. He was the one bringing in the
Mm,
result, but he's the one not getting paid because he was the business owner.
mm,
Had to pay the team first and had to pay the bills and everyone first. Um, but that's where his frustration was. Well, I'm doing all the work and I'm not getting paid.
yeah,
So
yeah. No, it's
that was a
important.
key area of his frustration.
Yeah, yeah. And your next one, Arch?
The next one. So this guy, this lady, I'll call her the youngster. She was very young when she owned her first business. Unfortunately for her, it failed dismally. So she was sick of working for other people. Like she's mid-30s now. Um, really excited about becoming a business owner again, but still scarred by that first experience. So very, very fearful that, what if this one goes the same way as the last one? She also had a young baby. So she knew she needed to change her approach, given that she's now got a child. But part of what was driving her was, well, maybe I can be an example as a mum. I can be an example to my child about what mum can be capable of doing. So that was a really big driver for her too. So her excitement was engaging, but her confidence and her belief in herself were really low. So they were the things that we really focused on when we worked with her. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Again, such a powerful story, isn't it? Where people are held back from doing what they could achieve, right? And
yeah.
and they just need some help working through that and
Mm.
and getting that belief in themselves.
Yeah, and you would probably know, Mark, how many times have you met people and they've got everything they need? You can see it in them, but they can't see it in themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Mm.
And any more that you want to share? We got a bit of time.
Yeah, just the other one, just quickly, was the exit strategy. So this business owner had built their business to a really solid, high-performing business in a niche market. So they'd been around for a number of years, and as you do, they're like 70 staff, 8 locations, so a good, solid, high-performing business. And as the business owner, he was being called into other non-competing work in the same space, in that same market. So when you build a business like that in a niche market, you build yourself a profile in the process. So he had this profile, and that was then led to him being called on to do other work in that same market. So the challenge was, well, I've got this business that takes all my time, but I'm really excited to be doing something bigger and better here. Sure, my business is really important, but there's a higher calling here. There's some other things that I could really help some other people by doing this other work. So the challenge was for him was, well, how do we maneuver the business so the business still runs perfectly as it does now, but with much less involvement with him? So, again, over a 6-month period, we looked at a lot of those kind of things about setting up the right structure, setting up, and a lot of it was mindset, was how do I let go and trust the people who I'm working with, and how do I trust them to run the business without me watching them all the time? So it's you talk about, getting ready to sell. Big thing of the business, if you're ready to sell it, you've got to be able to let it go. And we see a lot of business owners,
Oh
right,
yes.
try and sell it, but don't want
So
to let
many
it go.
So it's so common. There'd be so many people listening to this that would relate to that, Arch. And it's I often talk about the E-Myth Revisited, when it talks about technician gives up one job they know how to do really well and exchange it for 9 they have no idea about. And when they get really good at those other 9, they get to a point that they either have to delegate it, and they struggle with that, or they want to sell it and they have to remove themselves. But that letting go, nobody can do it as well as I can. Well, that's fine. That means you've got it forever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a habitual thing.
Right, and it comes back. But as you pointed out to me a few times, it comes this inability to let go, these doubts and all this sort of stuff come from many different places. But it comes from things that you learn that are now unhelpful, right?
Yes,
They're the things
so.
they're the things that helping you that are holding you back.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from our childhood. Like we suffer an experience in childhood, like I did with my story. We go through that experience. We attach a belief, or we form an opinion around that experience about what happened to us. And much of it happens, a lot. That was in my teenage years, but a lot of that happens a long time before that. So we form this opinion in childhood that resolves whatever that situation is. Then we don't understand as a child that belief actually isn't helpful for us. But we never ever stop until we get challenged to. We never ever stop and examine that belief and go, well, is that really helping me? So a lot of those things that we form as a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old that we can remember, we go, well, that worked for us when I was 5 or 8 or 10, but it doesn't work for me now that I'm 30 or 40 or 50. It doesn't work anymore. But we don't stop and examine it. So
look, I've got, as you know, I've got a teenager at home, and I often say, I'll often look at her and look at some of her behaviours, and I'll just say, look, that hasn't worked for me for about 40 years. It mightn't work for you either. You don't have to copy everything I do, right? But that's, like, I can see that in her, but actually, like, when I look back in my past, there were also things that I got from my parents that were fine for them, but it would probably be better if I didn't hand that over to my kids too, right? Like that intergenerational learning can be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. We do things the way we were taught to do them, and our children watch us. I copy what I see.
That's right. And my mother always said, your kids will do what you do, not what you say, right? And and it's very, very true when they're teenagers. Which is frustrating.
I run a youth camp under Rotary, and I know one of the things that I really stress to the leadership team is, the participants who come to the camp will model your behaviour. They will copy what you do. So if you don't like their behaviour, let's have a look at what we're doing, because it might be very, very similar. So one thing I drum into them for that very reason.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Mm.
right. That's right. It's no, that's very important. And actually, so that's a reasonable segue. So we know some of we've had some examples of the kind of pain, the kind of journey people, business owners
Yeah.
and business leaders come to you with in
Yep.
the SME space. What sort of outcomes can you help them with? What sort of outcomes do they expect? Because obviously, they're coming to you, frustrated, burnt out, unclear,
Yeah.
disconnected, gazillion things to do, health issues. Um, but what are
Yep.
the outcomes that you can actually deliver for them?
Yeah. So if I go back to the financial planner where he's frustrated and things aren't working, I've worked with them now for close to 3 years. They set this big high target that they set here after we took this one out. They are now very, very close to consistently hitting that target, and it's a significant increase on where they were when we started working together. What I love about them is that they're now holding themselves accountable, in that if their target is multi-million dollars a month, if they fall a couple of $100,000 short, a lot of people will be tempted to go, well, we got pretty close. That's near enough. It's good enough. They're going, no, that's the number. We either make it or we don't. If we don't get that number or higher, then we didn't achieve our target for the month. So they're really self-accountable for that. And they go back now and they look at, well, what are the things we could have done? Was it one more phone call? Was it one more, discussion with a provider that might have helped? Was it one more thing that we missed in the plan? What could we have done that in that month for those clients that would have got us over the line that month? So, I look at that business owner now, much healthier, much happier, takes holidays, and now has the cash flow. So they're not quite consistently hitting that budget, but their cash flow is much better than it was. So now when they come up with an idea, they've got the cash flow to actually execute that idea. So,
Mm.
so that's not holding them back anymore. So
Good.
they're just so close. So I'm super excited for them.
No, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And what so that's a very specific outcome, but more generally, how
Yep.
can you help? Like we've talked a lot about clarity on goals,
Yep.
and what moves you closer to where you want to be. Can you unwrap that a bit for me?
Yeah, sure. So, we talk about clarity and, for want of a better word, goal setting. And I know it's sort of everybody will say, have you got a goal setting? Have you done your goals? Have you got a plan? Have you got all this? Yeah. And we need to do that, because at the end of the day, the goal, whatever it is we're trying to achieve, becomes our compass.
Mm.
And as you'll know, as in your own business, Mark, that there'll be things that come along and you'll have your direction that you're heading in, and then something will come along from over here, and you go, well, that looks like a good idea. That could be a good opportunity. Now, it might be, and it might not be. So, but the question to ask is, will this thing move me closer towards my goal, or will it move me further away?
That's
And
why
it's
you need
actually
he-
then,
that's why you need help, Arch, because I do this all the time. I didn't think I was like this, but since I've been working with an outsourced marketing consultant, I'm going back to him every week with a new idea, and he's, Mark, stay on focus. This is what we this is what we said we'd do. You have to execute this now, right? And I'm like, I never realized that about myself until I had someone to reflect it. It's really powerful.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's that, will this thing, it'll look bright and shiny,
Mm.
and it'll look really positive, and we might need to do a little bit of work on it to see whether it actually is everything that we think it is or whether it's not. But if it's not going to move us towards our goal, that's why we need to be really clear about what our goal is, because then we've got that focus, that becomes our compass, and then we can go, that is really good, but it's not going to get me to where I want to be now. So I can just park that. It's not that I knock it on the head and never touch it again. It's more of a not now rather than a no.
Yeah,
Right? If I get to a point where I go, actually, that'll really help, I can always go back and revisit that. But
yeah.
for the moment, that is not going to get me to where I want to be. So I need to be willing to let it go. And we fall into this trap of, well, we'll just take everything that comes.
Mm. Mm.
And then we wonder why we're scattered all over the place. It's
What I need to
because,
get back to, what I need to get back to on that, Arch, is going back to my ideas bucket. I used to have an ideas bucket. I stole this from a business consultant years ago,
yeah,
and it's great because when you get those ideas, you stick it in the ideas bucket, because sometimes
yeah,
you're super creative and ideas are flowing all the time,
yeah,
and other times you're completely dry and you're like, what do I do next? Well, you go back to the ideas bucket and
yeah,
prioritize.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and write them all down so you've got it all there. So that there will be days, as you say, when you're bereft of ideas and you go, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Well, hang on, I've got a list here that might just kickstart me.
Yeah.
So that was one. So that was, the goal setting and the clarity around it. The other one was actually making decisions. And this is for a lot of people, is that when we come, none of us ever got taught how to make a decision. We all get told that we need to make a decision. But if you're anything like me, Mark, your parents didn't sit down and then walk you through the process about how you actually make a decision.
Yeah.
What do I do? They say you need to decide.
Mm.
Okay, so the decision making is something we actually need to learn on our own. But all you can ever do is decide right now with whatever you have. But what we try and do is hedge our bets and go, well, I'm sitting here at the crossroads and go, well, if it goes that way, then I want to do this, this, and this. But if it goes that way, then I want to do that, that, and that. So we try and hedge our bets as to which way we think it's going to go, which is why we sit there and go nowhere.
Mm.
All we can ever do is decide with what we have right now. We need to make the decision and move forward. If that decision turns out not to be right, then we can always change it again.
Yeah. So I think it's it's useful to bring in a sailing analogy here because it's both of our passions, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But it's about you need to set the course, right? You need to
Yep.
you need to know what mark you're sailing to, what waypoint you're going to, and then you can do course correction on the way, but you're always still going to the same spot, right?
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
it's the same in business. You need to have your waypoint. And yes, you can do a bit of course correction on the way. And in sailing, it's very frustrating because it's never a straight line from A to B.
Mm.
But that's life, right? It's never a straight
Yep.
line from
Yep.
A to B. There's plenty of course correction, and even more frustratingly, in sailing, often you go off in a particular direction and it's slower than the other direction, so you have to go
Mm.
further, but you're going faster and you get there sooner,
Yep.
rather than the shortcut, right? So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, still on boats, you talk to, the captain of any ship, a cruise liner or a commercial freighter, and go, where's your next port? They'll tell you.
Mm.
They know exactly where they're going. They might not be quite fully aware of the course and how it's going to pan out, but they know exactly where their next port is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yep.
And what about identity, Arch? Because you talk a lot about identity and how to become
Yep.
the person that you want to be.
Yep. And that was obviously really relevant for me, and in terms of the way I see myself, and obviously for the youngster, this young client of mine that I was talking about, this is about, how do I become the person or becoming the person who will run the business that I want to run. So if I want to be, like I look at this young lady and she goes, I want to be a business owner who's successful. Well, clearly she needs to do some things and change some things from the way she's done them in the past. So it's about working at, well, if I'm a successful business owner, what sort of things would a successful business owner be doing? Where will I go every day? Who will I talk to? What sort of business will I be in? What product am I selling? All that. But it's been really, really clear about, well, who's the person that runs that business? What do they do? Where do they go? Who do they talk to? How do they think? How do they feel? How do they act? And I need to become that person. I need to think like that person. I need to feel like that person. I need to act like that person to move my business to that space. Because until I become that person, my business will never follow me.
Mm. Yeah,
We
that's
think,
right.
we always think that we'll grow and follow the business. We don't actually. The business follows us, follows our growth. So the more I move into that space, the quicker my business will follow me.
I've often had this challenge again with the kids, trying to teach them how to choose their friends, right? And it's like,
Yep.
well, okay, you choose your friends because you work out whether they share the same values as you, whether they whether they if they have a similar background, whether they share the same values, whether they're likely to respond to certain stimulus, and whether they're reliable or not, right? But to do that, what I realize is that you need to know your own values. You need to
Mm.
understand your own
Yeah.
values and
Yeah.
and what you're like. You need to know who you are, before you can
Mm.
make good friendships,
Yeah.
because you don't know how to gauge a friendship. There are some people that are excellent fun to be in a pub with, but you wouldn't necessarily phone them when your wife's left you, right? Like,
Yeah.
those
Exactly.
sorts of
Yep.
things, right? So you
Yeah.
need to know who you are and what your values are and your belief systems are, So before you can pick your friends, and it's the same with business as well, because actually what I've discovered is that when I understand what my core values are and how that relates to business, that makes it much easier to find partners. That means that I don't make mistakes. That means that I don't have disagreements with my partners and complicated conversations, because I understood my own business. I chose my customers and my partners better.
Exactly. Another word for it might be, feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Mm.
And it's just being comfortable with who you are, even if that's different from the people around you. And we, particularly when you talked about your kids. So the number one priority for kids at school is fitting in. I actually want to be part of the cool group, or I want to have a group of friends who I get along well with, who accept me as part of that group. Because if I march the beat of my own drum too much, I might not fit in and people might not want to be my friend. So we do this conformity thing. And if we're not careful, we carry that into our business life as well, and that we conform. But one of the best things that we can do is actually be, as you say, true to ourselves and follow the beat of our own drum. Because what happens is like-minded people will then join us.
Yeah.
And when we've got the courage to walk our own path and live the way we want to live, it's amazing that you pick up. And quite often there might be people that you just don't expect. There'll be people that you know or you're aware of, and suddenly they'll turn up and you go, hang on a minute, you're actually very similar to me. You've got very similar beliefs. We could actually work together. So it's those people, the more you do that, those people will turn up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's identity so important, because it's certainly for you and I, it becomes our brand as well, right? So people come to us because they can see in our brand what our values are. They can see who we are. They can see that we know who we are, and then it's easy for them to make a choice whether they work with us or not. That's really important.
It's that whole authenticity bit. That's, do my actions match my words? Because my actions will speak louder than my words.
Yeah, always.
We talked about, people will copy our actions, especially if they're children. Copy our actions. What are my actions? This whole authenticity piece, and we get drawn to those people who feel to us like they're authentic. One of the things one of the ways I often describe it is, you meet somebody new, and on the outside they look like they've got it. You look at this person, and go, wow, this person's got it. And then you sort of scratch through the surface a bit more, and you find a bit more of what you've seen on the surface. You get to know them a bit more. You spend more time with them, so it's almost like an onion. You start to peel back some layers, and all you keep finding is more of the same thing. Same person, same attitude, same response, same actions, reliable, whatever it might be, you see more of the same. And you go, okay. But the other side of that is they're the people who have really got this bit nailed, this whole self-image bit nailed, because they know who they are, because it's right through them.
It would be quite a surprise to peel back a layer of an onion and find a lemon, right?
Yeah. Well, the flip side of that I use in that explanation is that sometimes you'll meet someone exactly the same thing. You go, gee, this person's got it. And then you'll start to peel back layers and you'll scratch through the surface, and you suddenly find that there's not much there. There's nothing sitting behind this exterior.
Yeah.
And you go, there's almost an empty shell. Solid might be a good word for it. So the people who've got it seem solid, and those who don't have it just they seem a bit wishy-washy. They're not quite, they falter a bit, when the heat comes on. So.
And sometimes that comes from their past as well. It's those sorts of people often, it's a defense mechanism, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Where you project and shut certain people out. So just moving on then. So for people that might be listening to this, that have experienced some of the things you've talked about, frustrated with their teams, feeling unsupported, burnt out, unclear where they're going, pulled in a million directions. I probably relate to some of that. What can
we all do? At times we all do.
So what services do you provide? What can people buy? Like if people were like, oh, Arch sounds interesting. I want to explore what I can buy from him. What do you do?
Yep, sure. There's a couple of things. It starts really with like a 2-hour workshop. So I'd set this up, and it's just, I will give you everything I've got for 2 hours. You will sit down, you tell me everything that's going on in your business. We'll then work through some things. I'll give you what I can in that 2 hours. If there's more over and above that, then I'll say, well, here's some things I would work on. If you decide that you want to spend more time working with me, then I could map this out. So, but that can be a really good exploratory option for the person who's thinks that they might be on the right track, but not 100% sure, wants to dip their toe in without breaking the bank and tying themselves up for time. So we can do that quickly and easily. And it's pretty straightforward, but they'll get a much clearer picture of how I could help them. Second one is slightly bigger than that, is what I call the Definition to Destiny workshop. So it is 3 half-day workshops. So we do 2 days of sort of bit of theory and prac about the concepts that I work with. And then I'll give you a short project for about 4 weeks, and then we'll come back and we'll look at all those concepts that we've talked about and apply that to, well, how did that go in that project? And again, it's a little bit more in depth, but it gives people a little bit more of a look at the type of things I work on.
Hang on, sorry, that workshop, is that just for business owners?
It can be business owners, it can be individuals. So it's
what about teams?
Yep, I could do that for a team.
Yep, sure, okay,
yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So so it's just 3 half days without getting so again, dipping your toe in the water. It's a little bit more in depth, but it's not going to break the bank either. So,
sure. Yeah.
And then the third and fourth one are slightly longer programs. So I have one called Magic in Your Mind. It's about, we have 6 mental faculties that we can use as human beings that we can apply to solve a lot of our problems. We're probably aware that we've got them, but we've never really been taught how to use them. So I've studied this once or twice before. I'm studying it again now. And every time I study it, it just blows me away. So it's a 3-month program with a weekly meeting. And then the one on top of that then is the Thinking into Results, which is a 25-week program. And it's quite intense. So it's a weekly meeting. Again, I can run that for individuals or groups, but it's 25 weeks. So it's basically 6 months. But it's quite intense, and there's some work for the participants to do outside of our weekly meetings.
Yeah, right.
So,
no, that's and it's really powerful, right? Because it can make the difference between you living your dream and not. And sometimes you don't know what's holding you back. In fact, one of the guys that you introduced me to talked about like you're in your powerboat and you're pushing the throttle forward, and you're not going anywhere. And what happens is the stern sinks, and actually what you discover is actually you're still attached to the pontoon. and I just love that analogy, right? And I think that's why it's so important doing what you do, because you just sort of help people see that they're still attached to the pontoon, and they got to let a few things go before they can put the power down and go where they need to.
And as human beings, one of the things we love is certainty. We love to be certain of the outcome before we make the decision. We love to be certain of the result before we take the leap. Trouble is, there is no certainty. The certainty comes from within us. And that's, if you can find that within yourself, then you're much better off.
Yeah, that's right. Mindset, of course, is very powerful, and in sales, mindset's sort of a large chunk of it. It can be brutal out there in the marketplace for salespeople and business owners that are selling. And getting your head around it can be a challenge. I remember taking on this client. He said when we started, the idea of selling makes me feel physically sick. Right, that was his mindset. Right.
I've met a few people like that.
Right, there you go. See, so this one's completely fixed, and every time he pushes back on taking the next step, I'm like, that's okay. We'll get there. It'll come, because it will. And he just smiles at me, and he's like, "Not today, Mark." But I know he'll get there, right? So he's been with me for 3.5 years or something. And now his business has grown by 4 or 5 factor, right? So it's incredible what people can do when they're released to be able to achieve it.
Yep. And
sorry, go on.
I mean, just to know, is he still not today, Mark, or is he a bit more lenient and relaxed with himself now?
I'll be honest with you, Arch. He's a better salesman than me now. He's absolutely killing it. He's fantastic. So
Yep.
that's great. That's great. And
Yep.
all credit to him, right? I just
Yep.
cut the rope.
Yep.
So
And I think that's testimony, to, we're not limited by what happened. Sure, those beliefs that we form in our childhood that come along and trip us up now doesn't have to be that's the way it's been. That doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. We
yeah,
can change that. It might take a bit of work and a bit of effort, as your guy clearly has. But if you look at the result that he's got, if you asked him, was it worth it? I think I know what his answer would be.
yeah, absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. Arch, it's always great fun talking to you, and I can talk to you all day.
Yep.
And we've had a crack at that too. But how can people learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you? And engage your services?
Yep. So I'm on LinkedIn, just under Arch Downie on LinkedIn. You can come and join my BNI chapter, or come and visit my BNI chapter, BNI Ignite, in South
Mm.
Brisbane at lunchtime on a Thursday. Um, Either one of those two, or my website, archdownie.com.au.
Or of course you can come
Mm.
to me and I'll connect you with Arch.
Yeah.
I've connected Arch with a few people, and I'm happy to do that anytime. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Arch, for coming on the podcast, and talking about what you do and the wonderful value that you provide to your customers, but also sharing a very personal story. And I really appreciate that you come on the podcast and talk about such a personal story to you. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Mark. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's good. So this concludes another episode of Scale Up or Sell. And again, big thank you to Arch Downie. Please look him up on LinkedIn and on his website. But I'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks for listening.